Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the January 23rd meeting of the ESS Coordinating Committee. Just to verify, you should be able to see your agenda on your screen. And, when we get to discussion areas and general conversation, I will try and switch views so that you can see each other as you're speaking. But while we're going through some materials, I'll keep the agenda and the supporting materials on screen, if that is okay. So the first thing I would ask for the subcommittee members who are present, do you have any editor questions to what is the October 17th meeting? Any adjustments or changes you want to make? Thanks. I see a head nodding no. That is great. Thanks. Thank you, Kathy. Any other comments? All right, then we're gonna move on. So the first item on the agenda is an update on the status of the fee policy proposal. And actually, we have a number of guests here today, primarily because we did bill this as a full update on the fee policy and modernization initiative. And I'm going to try and do that and then entertain any discussion that you may have. The way the agenda is structured, I put the fee policy discussion up front. Then all of the modernization type changes relating to formatting, we will cover those together. And we are going to focus primarily on updates or changes. So we've had a tremendous amount of discussion and input into much of the proposal, and our intent is not to relitigate or re-explain anything. If anybody has any specific questions, of course, we will pause and answer them. And if there is something you want to comment on, please don't hesitate to do that because we do want to encourage discussion. So I'll start with the recording fee policy and what our status is. First of all, we have submitted the bill draft that was created at the end of November. It really hasn't changed much since then. To the Legislative Services Agency, it has been signed off, at least in the Senate. I think we have approval from the House Local Government Committee to proceed as well. And I think they're just waiting on the Senate to take the lead. We are waiting on the Legislative Services Agency to finish their bill draft. And if you haven't worked with the legislature before, I can just share with you that we are certain to have something come back from the Legislative Services Agency that we don't think is right or isn't worded correctly or whatever. And part of that is because it's their job to be the style police for the Iowa Code. And part of their job is to order or maybe decide where certain things go. So, for example, we did suggest a place in the code to put the new surveyor's policy in. But the Legislative Service Agency could very well say, no, we don't want to put it there for whatever reason. Let's do it here, or let's create a new lettered section, something like that. So we anticipate that that's going to happen. And once we get a draft, our hope is that we can work with the committee leadership in the legislature to make a number of non-substantive technical changes that we are aware of, and I'm going to go through those with you this morning. So as far as the overall fee policy, I cannot speak for any stakeholder group or any legislator. I can only give you impressions about where we think we are generally. Generally speaking, there hasn't been any particular group or legislator that has said no over my dead body. Okay. Generally speaking, the stakeholder groups that we have communicated with in a very robust way have either said, yeah, it looks okay, or they've said nothing. They've been silent about it. And so our hope is that, silence means to a certain degree some measure of consent. But I also have to say, based on experience, that sometimes you just don't know where anybody is until there's a bill that's actually in bill form and in front of people where they can read it and say, okay, I think this should be different, or I don't support that. And then, when groups start engaging in the actual bill, then we'll find out about what changes people want to make or what things people are in disagreement with. And that is a natural part of the process. I think, from our point of view, from a staff and a leadership point of view, we really, really, really tried hard to make sure that particularly the key real estate stakeholder groups know exactly what we're doing and know what the wording is. And, um, we would have hoped that if there was any substantive concern, that it would have been raised before now. And if it has been, we have tried to address that issue. Um, I'm going to just give one example of that. Um, and again, I am not saying what this particular group's official position is going to be. We can't speak for them. We'll know that when a bill is actually in process. But an example would be one of the main concerns that was raised by the Bar Association Real Estate Committee was very large documents and the size of the fee that would be likely if the new $10 per page fee went into effect. So what did we do? We went back and did the math um, and determined that if we put a cap on at a certain level, that it wouldn't significantly affect the overall revenue stream, um, and it would address a concern that they have. So the current bill draft that's been submitted to the legislature has a $500 cap on the recording fee. Um, and uh, subsequent to that, we've also done some further work to create some supporting materials to show what the effect of the fee change is. And the latest iteration is what I have on stream. And there, I think, are really three main things uh, that you might notice. One is in the upper portion where it says current versus proposed, or current and then proposed in two separate columns. Um, Based on communication that, for example, one of our legislative representatives, Nate Laning, was having is that, we do have a lot of moving parts in the fee proposal. And she was looking for something that would paint a clear picture about what exactly are the changes. So the left column is there to say this is what today is, and then the right-hand column is this is what the proposal would be. Um, so an attempt to put a succinct summary together. Here's now, here's the future. And I think really the idea behind that is to show that there really is a simplification of the fee structure with the changes that are being proposed. Then the second thing that uh, we wanted to address is that in the previous materials, we had a reference to what the effect of inflation would be, but it was felt that we could be more clear to juxtapose what the fee would be in certain situations versus what it would be if we had applied inflation. And generally speaking, if you want to put it in percentages, if in the full inflation formula were to be implemented, pretty much no matter what the number of pages is, the fee would increase by about 192%, which is a big number. And you juxtapose that with what the actual fee increase would be, which on the face of it looks to be 100% increase because it's going from 5 to 10. When you take into account all of the other changes, a one-page document is not going to be going up 100%. It's actually going to increase by only 42.8%. And the reason for that is because we're getting rid of the $2, right? So a one-page document is really only increasing from $7 to $10. And then the next thing that we tried to address in this updated document is to show that for the vast majority of documents, the fee increase is not 100%, but it's less than that. And we basically went back and looked at the numbers. We were able to use 2024 data, and it showed that 70% of all recorded documents in Iowa were 3 pages or less. And so when you do the math on that, it kind of says, oh, well, most of the documents are not going to see, a huge increase, or maybe not as big as it appears. So I believe we have circulated this updated document. I think it's either on the fee policy webpage that Kristen created, or it may also be on the hub. But this has been out there. It's being used, and so you are free to use this in your communication with your legislators and stakeholders. Um, uh, I would observe that the one rubbing point that seems to be coming to the fore is those who prepare and file mortgages. So, when you do the math on that, the fee increase from a dollar perspective is not trivial from their point of view. Um, so we looked at the numbers for 2024 because we're trying to use updated information, and found that the average number of pages for a mortgage document, not a release, but a full mortgage document, is usually in the range of 11 and a half to 12 pages. So when you do the math for an 11-page document, you're talking or a 12-page document, you're talking about a recording fee of 110 to $120. And from the perspective of mortgage company or a bank, that seems to them to be a pretty significant increase. And the thing that they're doing is, and it's understandable, they're saying, I can go into another state with a flat fee structure and record an 11-page mortgage, and it's only going to be $45, or it's only going to be $55. And instead of being among the lowest recording fees, I'm going to be paying among the higher recording fees just because of the way the math works out. So those are conversations that are still ahead of us. Um, but generally speaking, I think that um, I can't say we've had a warm reception or, overwhelmingly enthusiastic reception, but it's not overly negative either. And I think most of the stakeholder groups, understand that, okay, it hasn't changed since 1985. Probably it's time for some change. So it's a question of getting into the details. And we probably won't get into some of those discussions until we actually have a bill to address. So the other thing I want to mention is that some of you, or most of you, know that the association is helping by encouraging response to a survey that we're circulating. And what we're doing is we're trying to update the financial models that we did in the spring and summer and the fall. Instead of using 2023 data, now that 2024 is behind us, we're looking to use 2024 data. So the survey questions are really around the idea of um, updating that information so we can do the analysis just like we did for 2024. We don't expect it to be a huge difference in terms of impact, but until we actually see the numbers, we aren't going to be able to actually say that. And realistically speaking, we just know that the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, the Services Agency, and legislators, they're going to want to see more current numbers. Um, they're going to say, well, 2023 was 2023. What about 2024? And if we can get everybody to respond to the survey, then we're prepared to update the financial models that we did and then share that. So, one of the things that I think you should look forward to maybe by as early as the end of this month, is having some printouts and reports showing what the fee uh, change impact would be using 2024 data. So that is underway, and that is the main reason why we're doing the survey. And we would just encourage everybody to respond to it. And then if we have questions, if we don't think the numbers look right or whatever, we'll follow up with those individual counties. Um, so that's generally where we are at with the fee proposal right now. And again, until we actually have a bill and the bill has a number and it's been filed in this committee, then we will start to hear from uh, the legislators and the stakeholders with maybe a little bit more details. To the best of my knowledge, almost all recorders have been participating in the advocacy efforts and have been communicating with their legislators and stakeholders in support of the plan because it has a positive overall impact on the finances of counties. There are a instance or two where that may not be as enthusiastic of support as maybe what we would like. Um, you're a diverse organization. There are differences of opinion, and we just have to recognize that sometimes that happens. The most important thing that the members of the standard subcommittee and really all of the reporters can do is to communicate the positive about what the rationale is, why it's important, and what the effect is going to be. And that leads me to just mention briefly the two closing questions in the survey are asking for insight into uh, what you as a recorder would do and what your county supervisors would do if this were to become law. Because legislators are interested to know, hey, what are you going to do with this money? It's a fairly healthy increase. It's going to produce additional revenue, both internally for the recorder's office as well as for our land records, but also for the county general funds. And we don't have a standard answer. Every county is different, and each of you and the other colleagues of yours in your districts will have their own answers to that. And you may not have all the answers yet because it hasn't become law. But legislators are asking those questions, and we just want to put the question in your minds to make sure that you're prepared to answer that based on your local situation. I'll share one anecdote and then I will close on this part of the discussion. The anecdote is that we have already been approached by legislators who are seeking knowledge about how can they ensure one of two things. They have said they want to ensure that even the money that goes to the county general fund, they want to ensure that they're supporting the recorder's office operations and not a number of other things in county government. And so we've been explaining to legislators and their staff, well, this is how county budgeting goes, and we don't have the final answer on that, but they're asking that question. And then the other thing that we have heard is we're hearing um, that the that they're interested in making sure that it goes for property tax relief, which we know is going to be a large theme in this overall General Assembly. And so they're going to ask this question, how is this user fee increase, which some are kind of responding favorably to, how is this user fee increase going to help reduce reliance on property taxes? And again, that's not necessarily an answer that we because it's going into the county general fund for the most part. But it is a conversation that individual counties may have and probably will enter into the equation at some point in this legislative session. So let me stop there. This is a good time just to talk a little bit about um, what your questions and observations are. We have some of our leadership um, with us, and they can help answer questions too. So I turn the floor over to the group.
This is Kathy, and I was just going to say, Tim Cranebrink, that's in the Senate office for my area, he asked when we met with him, why not put something in there that like every so many years it goes up like another dollar or something, so that we don't have to come back to legislation again in 10 years or something. But I said we were trying to make it an easy amount with going from $5 to $10 and just making it an easy number for people to calculate. But anyways, that was his comment.
Yes.
I had
Thank.
this is Lisa. I had that same conversation with my senator in my area, and she was willing to do an amendment if we wanted her to, for that very fact, to have an increase, incremental increases every so often. And I told her the same thing. We don't want to appear greedy. We just want to get into the 21st century with these.
Mm-hmm. And the same thing happened here, and we said the same thing as you, Kathy. We just want to keep it simple. But that was something I had not thought of before we met with our senator.
Well, my comment to that is that obviously, I hope it's obvious that if there was an appetite to do something like that, that is something that we could work on and we would be supportive of. Um, I'm I would only share with you that based on my years of experience, that when you get to the leadership level, they are not as enthusiastic. I'm talking about legislative leadership, about putting things in on some sort of autopilot, right? You have more openness, I think, to the idea of reviewing something every so often, but not as much enthusiasm for putting anything on autopilot because legislators are legislators and they want to be the ones making decisions and not having things automatically happen. So that is the primary reason. Again, the simplification idea. You know, if you go by a percentage, then it's not $10 anymore. It's $10 and a few cents,
Exactly.
and therefore it's not simple anymore. It's easy to understand.
Yes.
So there are ways to address that issue that we are thinking about. We'll see what the appetite is for something like that. Um, but I think the big picture really is not to get confused in the minutia. The big thing that you want to achieve is the fee change itself. That is more important than anything else, even though it would be nice to have, you know, some sort of automated review in the future. That's not the main objective. Um, so I'm not saying no, and I'm not saying we aren't working on it or thinking about it, but that's why it's not in the proposal as it stands at the moment. Yeah, good questions though. Other comments?
I think
Um,
Kathy has one in the chat, or not Kathy, Carolyn. Is the 192% base fee increase calculated by taking the overall average of all the states listed on the chart? I think that one page. That
No,
one page chart.
just to be clear, that the 192% is just looking at what was $5 in 1985, and then what would it be if we fully implemented it today, and it just turns out to be 192%. There's no intent to compare that amount with the other states. That's not included in the math. I'm not saying we can't do that or that we even shouldn't do that, but you know, other states I would observe have sort of the same issues that we do, and that is that they have legislators and stakeholders who don't want to see these changing all the time, and they don't want them to be too high. They want to be competitive, and I think one thing that is instructive to to us is that if you went to the same flat fee that Minnesota or Michigan or Wisconsin have, and that was your proposal, it would not have as much of a positive impact on your funding. So we the fee policy group, did look at, oh, should we consider a flat fee structure? And I won't say who said this, but we tried to say we want the fee increase to be reasonable. We want it to be simpler, and we want it to be um, um, uh, uh, meaningful. And I think what the reason they chose to go with the model that we have right now is produces it is reasonable because it's less than inflation. It is simpler because we're eliminating a number of fees, and it's still meaningful because it produces revenue that would really make a difference in almost any county, and that's kind of how they uh, thought about what models to choose. I understand what Carolyn is saying. Better to ask now than again in 5 years. Um, you really want to wait another 40 years for the next change. But still, what you got on the table right now is meaningful. And so I think we just have to see how the conversation unfolds once we actually have a real bill working through the process.
Do we have a time frame for a goal? I mean, it's like this fiscal year.
Could you repeat that for me, Jane? I'm
So
not
do
sure.
we have a time frame, a goal, a time frame goal, when we want this to get on the agenda or what, on the.
I I have received that question from others, and I'm just sharing with you, what should we be expecting, and this is a proposal that does have a lot of moving parts. It's probably going to not only have to go through the local government committee, but also the Ways and Means committees in the House and the Senate. And I think everybody should sort of set their expectations that this is a session-long discussion. Um, and I don't want to be negative here, but this is also something that depending on how things work out, we hope that we can make it through the funnels. We should because it's going to be a Ways and Means bill. Um, but you know, legislators and the governor have a lot of other things that they would deem as a higher priority. And so we'll just have to see how it shakes out.
Right.
But we're going to, this is a real effort, with Nick and Bob and Census and Stacy and Megan, and all of you, and the advocacy with your legislators. This is a real effort. And, I think it's appropriate for everybody, particularly with your own legislators and stakeholders, to say, hey, we really want to get this moving. This is real. We've waited 40 years. That's long enough. What more do we need to do? I think it's okay to politely say that. Make sure you say it politely. Uh, but realistically, I think everybody needs to expect that this is going to be a full session long project.
I'm asking, even when we were bringing our budget up, my board asked me and
Yep.
I didn't have an answer.
Yeah, so the legislature will probably be adjourning sometime in May, and so there isn't going to be a lot of time between that and July 1st.
Okay.
So I would just say each of you and your boards of supervisors need to, make their best judgment. We have to do the same thing in ILR. We haven't built a budget based on the assumption of passage. We built a budget based on status quo. And that is a rational thing to do. But if something changes, then you've got reason then maybe to go and amend your budgets. And there are ways to do that. So be prepared. Be prepared.
Thank you.
Do that.
They are
Okay,
just looking for money everywhere. That's.
I get that. Okay, so that's my update on the fee policy. Are there any other questions on that? All right, we're moving on. So again, uh, we have an hour and a half left. We do not have time to go through every single element of the bill, but I do want to identify a new document that you can use as a reference that we have not broadly published before, but it's in pretty good shape, and so we're happy to share it with you. But what we did is we took the legislative proposal. Again, the core document has not changed really since November. Let me bring that up. And so the way this document, which hopefully you can see that it's a table, it's titled Table of Standard Recording Requirements. And it covers both the fee policy change and all of the modernization changes, as previously approved with just a couple of exceptions, which I will explain. So column 1 is the actual code section, and then the next column um, uh, uh, is the next main column is basically a short text description of what the current purpose of that section of the statute is. And then the next column after that is an actual direct quote from the statute. How does that read today? Okay, in the current. And then the next column in, if there is a change, which there aren't in every case, what is that change? What's the new language going to be in the new section? And then in the next column, it is a brief text summary of what the intent of that change is. And then in the final column labeled notes is maybe a footnote or some explanatory statement. Most of the time, we are just calling out when there is no change in the statute. So if you look at 558.49 subsection 1, there's no change there. And that's why it's blank in the column labeled proposed new language. And that's why it says no change in the notes column. And you can go through, basically this goes through the entire proposal, section by section of the code, and explains, okay, this is the current law, here's how it would read under the proposal, here's the rationale for the change, or if there is no change, it just says no change. And really that is a document that you have not seen before. It is the same information that you have from the previous version, which looks more like a bill, but this is intended to be, in detail. Here's what we're doing with each particular paragraph, phrase, enumerated item in the bill. This is what it does. And I'm not, except for the things that are changing, I'm really not going to go any further than that in explaining it, except to say this is a resource for you. And I think that the one thing I would change is, I'm sorry, this has been recently updated. So, but January 17th, 2025 is the most recent date. So make sure that you note that. If there are changes to this document, then we will publish it again with an updated date. So this is fairly new, and we would just encourage you to review it as you desire. Uh, Kind of what's in our mind is that at some point there's going to be a legislator that is the bill handler, and they're going to have to be standing up explaining everything to their colleagues with the bill, either in committee or on the floor of the House or the Senate. And so what we were trying to say, can we put something together that would, be a guide, kind of a script, if you will, so that they can say, here's the change being made, here's the reason the change is being made, and then go through it section by section. And when we actually have a bill number, we'll redo this document and then go through it section by section so they have that information, but at least we won't be starting from scratch. And I admit to you and acknowledge this is not an easy, short document to go through, but all the details are there for everybody to see, and our goal of trying to be transparent with what we are doing. There you are. I'm going to move on, but are there any questions about the document or how it's formatted, anything like that before I move on? Okay. Please stop me if you have questions about that. But otherwise, this is your bedtime reading. If you want to look at it. Then, for comparison purposes, I know this is a lot of pages, but then included in your packet is the bill draft that we provided to the legislature. Okay, and so what we tried to do is go through this bill draft section by section, uh, and um, and this is exactly what we presented to the General Assembly. And we did this back at the end of November. So it really has not changed in a substantive way. And then as you get to the end of the bill draft, then there is a section I'm looking at, uh, page 45 of your materials, where we actually provided a section by section explanation. It's not paragraph by paragraph or line by line, but it does provide an explanation. And our intent and desire was when we put this particular set of pages together, when we presented it to the legislators and the Legislative Service Agency, if you've ever read a bill in the legislature, they have the bill itself, and then at the end, they have an explanation. And we wanted to provide as much help to the bill drafter as we could to provide a similar type of explanation as what they would write. And hopefully this ends up being helpful to them. But this is just the explanation. And in this particular draft, there was nothing new. It was the same as approved by the ESS committee and the County Recorders Association Executive Board. So if there's anything in the bill proposal that you would like to talk about, this would be a good time to ask any of those questions. But on the other hand, um, it's sort of the unofficial approved draft because we've taken it through the process and and this subcommittee before, and it should be fairly straightforward. Questions about that before I identify the changes that are being considered?
Hey, Phil, this is Stacy. I just have a couple of comments from Erin at Boone County that couldn't be here. She had a department head meeting. So can you guys
Okay.
hear me okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, the first thing that she said is that for the document numbers, we have the 2-digit county, 4-digit year, and then 8-digit. She'd rather see that as a ESS policy, not part of code. It might make it more difficult in the future. And I'm just going to read these three, if that's okay. I don't know if this
Sure.
is appropriate, but going forward, this is with the surveyors project. She had a couple of questions about the surveyors project, and I reached out to Sherry Jones, and we talked about that the surveyors would foot the bill for all of that. It would be like a repository for the old survey documents. And then the other one is just for backfile redaction, and we can talk about that later. I can add that when you guys talk about that. So I
Okay.
just wanted to make sure that I shared her comments and questions. So
Go back to the first one again.
okay.
Repeat that one.
So the instrument numbering, the two
Okay.
digit, yeah.
Okay. I can appreciate that.
Mhm.
You and the full ESS coordinating committee did spend some time talking about this. And where that stands right now, there is a potential that that will change from a 8-digit sequential number to a 6-digit sequential number. We've had this, the reason it was there was because we wanted to make sure that it was big enough for
Mhm.
every county, including Polk County. We have communicated with both the COT team as well as with Julie and Tom at at Polk County, and we're confident that 6 digits is going to be enough for them, and that COT has indicated they will be able to accommodate that. And also, I would share that that the subject has been discussed a couple of times with the service provider, and we actually are having another quarterly service provider meeting with them via Zoom this afternoon. And so we're keeping as best we can, keeping the service providers informed about what the potential changes are. Um, I think one of the things that I would share is that, and this is just an observation of years of experience, recorders generally and service providers as well pay more attention to what's in the code than what's in ESS policy. And as much as I think ESS policy, has some force behind it, it just isn't taken as seriously as the code. And so I would kind of take the position that if you're going to make a change like that and you want to have everybody do it the same way, then it probably should be in the code. That I'm not the only person in this discussion, but that would be my recommendation on that. Kathy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I talked to Aaron briefly and we were just kind of thinking maybe, because if we needed to change something with that down the road, it would be just easier if it was maybe in the policy and not in the code. Like if you had to revamp the amount of numbers or,
Yeah,
anything, it just might be easier to change it in policy.
yeah. There would be a possibility. Sorry, excuse me. There would be a possibility that maybe we could put something in the code that very clearly gave the authority of the ESS committee, to set that standard. I think that could be done if it was necessary. I'm having a hard time imagining what the change would be in the future, but we can certainly talk about that.
So,
Um,
and then the other
yeah,
thing was just too, what is the reasoning really of putting the county code number first? Because like, I mean, other than my county, I might know, I think maybe like Webster County that's beside us, I know they're new, it may be 94, but I mean, I don't know, I didn't know what the purpose of having the county number, because usually when people are searching documents, especially on Iowa land records, they're in only one county at a time searching.
yeah. Um, well, there are two reasons for that. One of them is from the standpoint of searchability. It can be easier for a user, because if they see the reference number, they're even if they think they knew they were searching in the right county, they're going to know for sure because of that county reference number. But a bigger issue is that in our statewide system, we currently require that the local service providers assign a unique code value to each document so that we can tell the difference between, something in your county versus Boone County or whoever. Um, and the service providers don't do it the same way. It's inconsistent. And we have run into circumstances where we end up with duplicate documents uploaded by a local service provider because they didn't pay attention to the responsibility to assign what is truly a unique code value. Okay, so uh, in doing some planning with our development team, basically in the future, if this change is made, and we do include the county reference number in it, then we don't have to worry about that. We'll just start using the actual reference number as a unique code value, because that will make sure that a reference with the same year and the certain sequence number, we're going to know exactly what county that belongs to, and it's going to be unique. And so that's the reason that we are doing that way. It's a great
That,
question,
yeah,
but
but that explains a lot, because I know when we switched to Fiddler, we had an issue with our unique
yeah,
code thing when it
yeah,
went stuff going to
absolutely.
Iowa land records. So
And
that
that
does
and,
make sense.
and then the other thing about it is that, we'll still have that issue for the backfile documents, but going forward, then we'd have a clean slate to move forward. And, one of the things, one of the ways it comes up is, I'm not using you as an example, okay, so don't take this the wrong way. But when you have a county that changes one service provider to the other, um, you know, some of the service providers might have even said, well, I don't care what theirs was, I'm going to change it. Well, that totally screws up our system, right? Because now we're going to have duplicates in our system. So there is a reason for it, and we do think this is a better long-term choice, even though it might not be obvious.
Hey Phil, this is Carolyn. Can you hear me okay?
Carolyn, go ahead. You broke up there a little bit.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure. I know at one point, I don't have Tyler, but our auditor does, and they were having a problem getting that many digits to fit in to Tyler's coding sources. Do you know, have you spoke with Tyler people to make sure that they are going to be able to switch to that long number?
Can anybody help me out there, because I really did not understand Carolyn.
Right,
Um,
it's Lisa. I can jump in. I think what Carolyn was trying to say is that have we spoken with all service providers? Specifically, she said Tyler, to confirm they will be able to accommodate the longer document number.
Yes, we have. Do I have it in writing from them? Yes. No, I don't have that. But there's no service provider that can even reasonably say that they didn't know about this. And like I said, we're going to talk about it again this afternoon. We record our quarterly meetings. I post them for the service providers if they can attend. And I put it in writing multiple times. So if there's a need for me to absolutely positively say, "Are you sure?" I will do that, Carolyn. I will do that. I'll report back to you on what I find. I actually have a meeting with the Tyler team scheduled for next week, and I will put this clearly on the agenda. Yeah. So I would just say that the way the policy, I'm seeing the note from Sherry, uh, and there should not be any misunderstanding about this, that in the future, following this policy, there would be no non-numeric characters allowed in the number. So it's going to be your county number followed by 2025, and then a 6-digit numeric sequence. And it needs to be that way so everybody is the same. Now, your service provider can, and they would have the ability to modify the display to show a dash in your records. But in terms of the underlying number would have to be uniform. And I hate to say this, Stacy, but could you go back and repeat your second question, because I've forgotten it already?
Absolutely. Well, we haven't got there yet, but the surveyors or the project with the surveyors and the historic
Yeah,
unrecorded plats. That's
yeah.
so we'll get there.
Okay,
Okay.
I will explain more about the surveyors project when we get there, but I would just say right up front that the surveyors have been very good to work with, and I believe that they're going to end up supporting this bill, um, and officially, and I can't guarantee that, but that's what I think is going to happen, and uh, doing something on these historic surveys is not a heavy lift. Yes, we will require some development work, but we've identified a work plan with them. Um, it's probably not going to happen all at the same time, but we have the methodology pretty well worked out, and it's not going to be that hard to do. I don't want anybody to leave this saying it's easy and it's free, but in terms of their contribution, in order to make this whole idea work, is what they're going to be contributing is elbow grease, right? They're going to be doing the research. They're going to be sending images to us. we've even identified a way for them to put the indexing information into a CSV file so that we could just import it. So it would not be correct to say that they're making a contribution. They would be, but and it will require some investment on our part as Iowa Land Records. It wouldn't be anything that we would expect the counties to have to invest in. That's where we are right now.
This is Nancy. I have one quick question, and you may have answered it when you talked about the unique identifier, but it has been introduced before, more than once, to limit the number of counties. So if they limit the number of counties, and what if they change the county numbers? If they combine these, will that cause an issue?
I don't think so. We just have fewer numbers, and they'd have to decide, whoever they are, you know, okay, you have a new county, what's their number gonna be going forward?
Okay.
So I don't really see an issue with that. I want to be very clear that we are not advocating for that. So, but
Oh, no,
you know,
I know. I
yeah.
just know that there's at least one
Yeah.
county that I know of that's in some severe financial issue. And if this bill for taxing keeps going the way it is, it's causing a lot of problems. So
Yeah.
I just wondered.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a great question. And then I'm reading the chat pod that Carolyn asked a question about, what's the cost going to be in terms of changing the numbers. You know, um, if you hear that a service provider is going to charge the county for some configuration change, or if they tell you that, I want you to let me know, because absolutely they should not be doing that. Can I just remind everybody that we pay Tyler and Solutions over $100,000 a year for support? No, they are getting paid. They're going to have to make this adjustment, and we'll have an argument about it if they go down that road. So there you are. All right, very good. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Happy to continue to take questions, but probably need to move on in the interest of time. So what I want to share with you now are the potential changes that would be made to the main bill draft. So subsequent to the provision of the draft bill to the Legislative Service Agency, we had some follow-up conversations with the Society of Land Surveyors of Iowa. And this is the same group that Sherry and Nancy and Jane have participated in. Sue Meyer was in this group as well. Basically, they said, we would really like to have some additional clarity on what parcel identification number we're providing, and then also what the additional parcel identifier means. And unlike maybe some other stakeholder groups, the surveyors are in favor of including this information on the documents that they submit, because they really want to search on them. So what I'm showing you right now is an amendment just to the section relating to surveyors. And that would be in the proposed 331-612. And what they have suggested is a more precise definition of what it is that they would be providing. And I think their intent was good. They want to be able to clearly communicate to their members, hey, this is what you should be doing. And so this language in subsections A and B is new based on that discussion. And this was reviewed with the working group, including the recorder members, and several of them are on the meeting today, and I would defer to them to make any comments. But from my point of view, this is really just a technical change and not a substantive change. And so we've generally said to them that this looks okay. And when we get to a point where we have a real bill draft, then we can offer this as a correction or an amendment. And then to go with that, there is also a modification in the enumerated items that are required in the index legend. And really, it's not a substantive change. It's just they wanted to put the additional parcel identifier, if applicable, at the beginning of the list. So the actual data elements are not different. It's just the ordering of those is something I wanted to change. And then lastly, they identified that, yes, they agreed with the removal of the reference to 331.606B subsection 5 from this particular section of the code, but they also felt that it shouldn't just be silent. They should refer to the new section, and that would be the equivalent of 331.612 subsection 4I. So again, I would not consider these to be substantive changes, but it was reviewed with the surveyors and the recorded work group. And so what would happen is the service agencies will deliver to us and to the committee chair, here is the bill draft. And we would just be saying to them, we have a technical correction that needs to be made. I don't know if we'd have to go through the formal amendment process or not. That's too soon to tell, but this would be in the character of a technical change. And I want to defer to Jane and Sherry and to Nancy to add any comments they want to make. Is what I said correct, you guys?
Say
Yeah.
that, because you said these were all items that they wanted in the index, and if it's,
I think you explained it well. That's why I didn't say anything.
yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
I agree too. And as recorders, we also indicated if it's there, we will index it
Right.
regarding
I
the
agree.
parcel numbers.
Right, exactly. So the kind of the standard that we said all along is that, if it's present in the document, it will be indexed. So it's not something that that a recorder would have to research. So we did keep that language in. Okay, I'm moving on. So the next one relates to I'm actually gonna have to switch to a different document here. In the current draft, there is a definition for the electronic services system, and there is a reference to what you would call a county land record management system. And last week I met with Paul Dre and Steve Brick as the Brick Entry team, and basically their review have said, do you see any red flags? Do you see anything that needs to be technically corrected? And the one thing that came back with was, we think you should have a definition for county land record management system. And so in that same section where the definition for electronic services system is, we would add in a definition for the county land record management system, which is not to be confused with the county, but it has to do with the individual systems that each of you use to do your recording and indexing. And that's what's intended with this. So I don't think it is a substantive change. I think the intent is to make sure that we have clarity in the code about what that means. And I did not have the opportunity to prepare this in time for a vote to be taken on it, but I did want to present it to you so that we had an opportunity to discuss it, and for me to answer any questions that you might have. But I don't view this as a substantive change, more of a technical addition. questions about that? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back to the packet now. And if you're following along in the agenda, in our first hour, we reviewed the status of the fee policy proposal and the basic components of the bill yet. And we didn't go over everything, but we did talk about a few changes that are being considered. And now what we're going to do is we're going to step into the special projects, those things that you would say, hey, these are modernization initiatives that we would do if the bill passes. And so I want to just go through each of these items briefly and answer questions. I'm not asking you to officially endorse anything in particular, but all these things that we've talked about, we've done some work on behind the scenes to make sure that what we're doing makes sense. And I'm going to just talk briefly about each one of these and give you a status update and then answer any questions that you have. So this first one, so we're under special project updates in your agenda, and we're looking at the bullet point that says County Upload API Workflow. So the basic idea here is that we need to define how we are going to work with you and your local service providers to upload documents to our land records. And one of the things that we are attempting to address is we want to do things a little bit differently to protect against unintentional changes to our database. And the way things are set up right now, and they have been this way from the beginning, is that if you wanted to use your system to update information in our land records, that you have the ability to use your system and the tools they provide you to do that. Um, we have had occasions where that has produced unintended consequences. So the potential for that is that you might upload information after you get a new service provider, and suddenly we have thousands of duplicate documents in the Apple Land Record system, and then we have to go in and manually manipulate things to either delete the duplicates, and we have to do something because we don't want to repay for all of the redaction service because we had already done them. So in a previous meeting, I presented to you basically the concept that we set up a process where um, uh, the recorder would be able to upload a minimum amount of information so that we could get basically a sort of a defined complete document into the redaction process as soon as possible so that it could be made public and accessible to your customers. And then we described that we would allow for up to 30 days or 1 month for a county to do whatever supplemental indexing or error correction, whatever needed to be done, that we would keep the door open for 30 days so that that error correction and updating process could occur. But at the end of the 30-day period, we would essentially lock those records and then set up a different method for future updates to occur. So this is a bit complicated to explain, but if you look at pages 52 and 53, the table here would specify the minimum things that would need to be transferred our land records to create a complete document, including the image, so that as soon as we receive this minimum information, we would send it through the redaction process and make it public. That is the idea behind this initial list. I do want to emphasize that this is a draft, so we are reviewing this with our development team, and we will be reviewing it with your local service providers too, to make sure everybody understands that. Most people have not seen this yet, so this is relatively new, but it is an elaboration on the brief description I gave you in your previous meetings. So once that initial upload occurred, then we would be talking about a full upload. And during that 30-day period after the recording date, the county would fill in the blanks, add in the rest of the party names, whatever needed to be done to make sure that we had that information. And then, we would consider the documents to be completely transferred to ILR, and then we would go from there. I think I heard somebody maybe jump in or try to jump in with a question. I'll pause. Was there a question?
My only thing is if we're going back to put parcel ID numbers in, it might be 2 to 3 months after we recorded the document to get those in before we get the list from the auditor's office.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Kathy. So we actually are planning for that. So the way that would work, there would be certain data elements that could be updated at a later point in time. And more specifically, we wouldn't allow somebody to come back and delete anything. But if you wanted to append a new parcel identification number from a consolidation or a subdivision, you would not have a 30-day time limit on that. You could do that pretty much at any time. And the same would be true for an associated reference. So you've got an old mortgage and then a release was filed. The release is pointing to that original mortgage. You would be able to go back into that original mortgage and update that associated reference. So those are the two instances where we're talking about leaving the door open so that updates should be added. So thank you for asking that question. I appreciate it because it's a very, very good question. In the case of backfile documents, obviously every backfile document that gets uploaded is going to be past the 30-day window. And in those cases, we're going to have a method within our team and our process so that all you would have to do as a recorder is communicate with us and say, hey, I have some backfile documents. I'm ready to upload them. And then we'll change the settings in our system so that you could update that historic information. So the only difference would be right now, it's possible for a county just to do that without telling us. And that can cause problems as well, because if a county wants to do that, we want to just look at our data and say, okay, do we already have something from that year? What do we need to do in order to avoid duplicates? And so we aren't trying to say no, we're just trying to say, hey, let's communicate and we'll have a process to make that happen. Then we also have to account for error corrections. So stuff will happen and be found after that 30-day period. And we can't just close the door and not accept error corrections. So in this description, the way it would work is that you would be permitted to upload updates, but they wouldn't be accepted into our system until they were reviewed by a member of the team like Corey or Lisa. Our thinking is maybe you can tell us if we're wrong, but really the error questions after 30 days should be fairly few and far between. And we think so far that this would not create an undue burden for our support team to review those changes and to basically what they would be able to do is they could either accept or decline. Most likely they're going to communicate with you as a recording office to say, hey, I see I made an update here. Just want to check in, make sure we understand what's happening, and then they can click a button and accept it, and then you're done. You don't have to touch it again. So it's not a process where we are rejecting something and not communicating with you about it. We have a process so that you can go ahead and upload it. It kind of goes in a holding pattern until our team can review it. And if it looks good, they can approve it. And if there's an issue or question, then they would communicate with the county about that. So The policy on images would not change from what it is today. Once we have a document, once we run it through the redaction process, we aren't going to allow any automatic replacement of those documents. We're going to ask the recording office to communicate with us and say, hey, I need to replace that image. And then we can manually mark that image to be replaced in the same way that we do today. And then if you look at Kathy, if you look at pages 61 and 62, this is where we describe the appended index information for associated references and new parcel identification numbers. So I don't want to mean, I do not want anybody to walk away thinking, oh, we've already done the development work on this. No, none of that has happened. But this is what we would do if we are in a position to have the bill approved. And then the last section, which is something I did have in the earlier draft that we distributed, is that we'd have a way to reverse data from ILR to the county land record system. So what that means is there are two use cases that we would have built into the new version of the API. One of them would be that if through our data normalization process, if we make, say, something a county didn't have post location information, and we were able to figure out a way to add that into our database, then we could communicate with the county and say, hey, we have post location information for this set of records. Would you like to import it into your database as a county? And it would be totally up to the counties to decide whether or not they wanted to do that or not. But it would have an opportunity to provide a more complete record in the county system that would be parallel to what our land records has. But the other use case is disaster recovery. Right now, we don't necessarily have a specific means to help a county repopulate its information in the event there was a disaster. And of course, we fully expect that every county is going to have your own backup plans, not our land records, but our land records can be a method of last resort. If something bad were to happen, that there was a fire at the courthouse and then somehow there was an earthquake where you were storing your other backup, whatever that would be, we would actually use our API as a means for the county to restore some of its records. Um, uh, and it's very possible to do in the same way that the API works where the county uploads records to ILR. It's just a reverse process. So what are we looking at? I am giving you an update on plans enhancements to the county upload API and how it would work. It's a little bit more detailed than the last time that we talked about it, and I'd love to have any comments or inputs that you have.
I've got a comment, Phil. This is Stacy, and this is really coming from Erin and Boone County. So they've done a lot of back file imaging. Their whole county did. They spent a lot of money doing that. So it sounds like they have images, but not index. So, and a lot of the images were redacted. So they don't have a true unredacted copy, and they don't have anything indexed. I don't know if it's by book and page. I didn't get that deep in the weeds with her, but she doesn't feel that those images need to be uploaded to ILR. Well, in my opinion, they're not complete because they don't have an index with them. But the way the policy reads, it sounds like that if they're in your records management system, they need to be pushed to ILR. So that's the question that she had. Does that make sense?
Yes, pardon me. Well, my answer on the policy is that the current policy, and it's been this way since it was originally adopted, is that if a county has an electronic record, it should be transferred to ILR, but it does need to have minimal index information so that it can be searched. That's what we exist for, right? So um, and this is why we came up with the idea of, what's the minimum information that we need in order to have a document in the ILR system? And well, we need the document type, we need the reference number or bookend page if it exists. As we talked about before, we need a unique code value, which in the future might just be the regular reference number. We need at least one party, some party that can be associated with it, but doesn't necessarily have to be all of them. And a recording date and time, and the images itself, along with information in the metadata about how many pages we should expect. Fairly limited amount of information that a service provider, if the county just images a document, that doesn't have much utility even in the county system if it doesn't have minimal index information. And then, so I think I would say that if a county had images, but they didn't have the minimal amount of index information, then it's really not a complete document, and we don't really have any use for it. But if it does have index information, then a current policy would say that every county should be uploading that. As far as your redaction question, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're referring to maybe a paper document was redacted, and that's the only version that they have. I would say um, that would be acceptable to send to us, because if it's the only version of a document that exists, then it's still going to have value to somebody. Where I would draw the line is if the imaging provider were engaged to do a redaction. Well, that doesn't really help us because, we don't know what redaction policy they followed or how they did it. And the reason we set up a statewide redaction system is so there would be some consistency. So if the redaction is there because that's the way the document exists in the county, okay, I understand that. But we would want to do something different if if the imaging provider actually did the redactions, because they shouldn't be doing that.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
this-
and like,
Oh,
I was
go ahead.
gonna say,
Go ahead.
we'd be in the same boat. We have a bunch of books. They were scanned and the COT system put them online. They used ARCA money a year or two before I started here and did that. But they're not indexed. They're just, it's just page after page of the book. And so
Yep.
there's no way we could put them all on Iowa
Right.
land records and
Yeah.
index them.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
I
Some of them
agree.
you can't even hardly read the print because they're so
Yeah.
old and.
Yeah. So I think, generally speaking, we would recommend that counties, when they do imaging, that they do it in a way where the image is there and separately indexed. If you choose not to do it that way and just are satisfied with having some old records online, that's allowed. It's just not going to be anything useful in the context of Iowa land records.
This is
It is what
Nancy.
it is.
This is Nancy. I have a question. When I make a change, like we've had an abstractor find an error from, say, 2002. So I make that change in my indexing. Right now, I check this little box and it goes to ILR. I'm assuming that it's updated there. That's what I was told. And when I'm reading this upgrading and transferring index errors, it sounds like it has to go through another process where you guys review it.
Yes.
And
So
then,
it would kind of automatically go into a queue, and then be presented to a member of our team to review. And if it were just a simple spelling correction for whatever, it could easily be approved and wouldn't take that long.
okay.
Again, we haven't developed it yet, but that is the plan.
Okay, because I also have some parsing that wasn't
Yeah,
completed and I want
Yeah.
to, in the future, get
Yeah.
that done. Okay,
yeah. that's the same kind of a change. And, I think what would be required, helpful anyway, Nancy calls Lisa and says, "Hey, I got some updates to make. Just want you to know about them so that we can watch for them when they come in." That's the way it should work. And so the original version of this would have said reject, don't accept, and then communicate. And the team thought it through and said, no, we should say yes if, and then accept them, and then go through an internal process so that we could accept them without, making a big fuss about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I have one more question, Phil. I don't mean to take all this time, but I just need a little history lesson. So, when this time of transfer back file records was added to the ESS policy, was that around the time with the PII and the shutdown of images? Because I mean, when I look at the ESS policy of 4.5, parent 1, it has that date, the backfile documents are December 31st of 2010. The date, I just wanted to get a little history with the dates, why in the policy there's those dates. So,
The history on that is that, at the time, which obviously was 2010, which was the same period that we were going through this massive redaction project, we had to decide how what the workflow was going to be. And so we just basically said, anything that is after, and it really had more to do with making things public. So anything that was recorded after that date, when it went through the process, we automatically made them public. For records prior to 2010, there was a higher incidence of PII. And so we treated those separately and actually had a process to randomly test groups that had been redacted to make sure that they were redacted before we made them public. So that that date was more related to when we make documents public than it had to do with the timing of redaction. I hope that makes sense.
thank you.
Yeah, and I would just remind everybody that before 2011, there was no policy and procedures. Okay, we had meeting minutes of the executive board and meeting minutes from an association meeting in downtown Des Moines. And then we had committee meeting minutes, and policy was in numerous documents. And it was at that time where the ESS committee said, we really should have all the policy in one place. And that's why the policies and procedures were created in 2011 to give some organization to it. And the redaction thing just happened to be happening at the same time. Great questions, everybody. Okay, so I do not want anybody to panic about this upload process. I just want you to be aware that planning work is being done. And this is the current status of the plan. Okay, and it relates to part of the overall improvement, of making information more complete in the database and things more consistent. Another element relates to consistency is that, not everybody has treated a certain data like instrument dates, postal identification numbers, and additional postal identifiers as things that should be uploaded to ILR. And I would even acknowledge that, back in the beginning, I don't think that we provided enough clarity to the service providers or the counties about these particular items, even though postal identifiers was a big topic back in the beginning. And so what this is about is simply trying to communicate with your service providers that, yes, these are elements that are in our XML schema, and the new JSON and the county upload API. And if they are present in your county system, we want you to transfer that information to us. And so the purpose of this memo is just simply to document for your service providers, what that means. And we even put together a bit of a tutorial to say in our upload API, here is how our data is structured. And we showed them the specific data elements that they should be transferring that information to. So it goes to a specific postal identification number identifier in the ILR database and with a type identifier, a postal identification number. And we provided the same specific information to the service providers about instrument date and also about the additional postal identifier reference. Um, um, the intent of this is twofold. One is to be as explicit as possible with your service providers about how and where they should be transferring that information, and then to also show them where that data exists in both of our current XML schema as well as in the JSON structure under the new API. And so we provided this information to your service providers. This is a part of our discussion with them. And it relates to the issue of data normalization because part of data normalization is to fill gaps in data. So we have not mandated this yet. We are still in conversation with the service providers. This is on our agenda with them this afternoon. And it has been our agenda with them for at least the last 2, if not 3 quarterly meetings. So there's nothing new here from a service provider perspective. But in communicating with our development team, we said, you know what, we really need to put this in the form of a tutorial so that service provider understands what they're doing. Now, pardon me, as we go forward, we'll go through the same kind of detail. In fact, if you go back up to what I shared with you earlier about the data transfer rules, that's what this table is for. This table is there to say, here is the data elements that we want. Here's the schema where it exists. And then here is the data element itself that we want you to send to us. And we have provided the documentation to your service providers in many forms over time, but I don't think we have provided it to them in this very basic, here are the instructions. And that's what we're beginning to do with your service providers. And it really relates to how the CU API is going to work. And these are just instructions for you. So I'm not asking you to do anything or to adopt a policy. I just want you to be aware that for both the county upload API and our efforts at data normalization, that we're trying to be as detailed with your service providers as we can be so they don't have any doubt about what they should be doing. And if you were to look at the agreements that we have in place with each service provider, we've provided them with the documentation. This is taking the communication to a new level so that they don't have any doubt about what they should be doing going forward. And it doesn't require any change or difference in behavior on the part of the county. It's just giving the service provider more instruction about what they should be doing. All right. Don't ask me to explain the JSON and the XML. I'd have to bring Kelly in for that, but that's the form in which it takes. And I want to say thank you to our development team for helping put that together. We have more to cover. I'm moving on. So sometime back, we put together a description of what the notification service would be. And I think actually the version of this dates back to November, maybe even October of 2024. And there have not been any changes to this. So I do not want you to leave with the impression that we're done with planning on it. There is more planning to be done. I don't want to give the impression that this is easy and doesn't require any investment. It does. Okay. But the basic plan that we have for a notification system uh, is is still as presented previously, and we'll continue to work on it as time and resources permit. I do want to just take this opportunity, though, for the standard subcommittee to, be aware that there is a dialogue happening um, out in the ether, I'll say, about, well, why does our land records need to do this? Shouldn't we just rely on our local service provider? And our position has been, first of all, that the Recorders Association asked us to work on this. And there is interest in the part of the legislature to have a notification system. And there is interest in having a statewide system. And like it or not, Iowa is the only statewide system that has the ability to do this. Individual service providers, yes, they can provide a notification system, but it really relates only to their client counties. And I don't see anybody standing in line to have their county data transferred to one of those other service providers just so they can provide a notification service. But everybody, at least so far, is a participant in Iowa land records. And that's why it makes sense, if you want a statewide system, to have a notification system built on our platform. So a question that you might get from a legislator is, why do we need to do a notification system through ILR when I hear that your service provider already can do it? And your answer has to be, if you agree, because ILR is a statewide system. And we want to have a statewide notification service, just like we have a statewide redaction process, and just like we provide a website where everybody can access 24 million records at no cost, and why we want to have a submission service that is consistent and the same for every service provider, every submitter, and not having to work through 99 different systems. So if there is a change in mind about whether or not anybody wants our land records to do a notification system, I think, it's a worthy discussion. And we're prepared to have it if there's a desire to do something different than what we've already got planned. But right now, if you go back into the bill that's been presented, one of the duties or authorizations for ILR, more specifically for ESS, is to implement a notification service. So does anybody have any questions about that? Or is there anything that we need to talk about before we move forward?
I just had one thought. Is there, instead of creating your own system, is there any other systems out there that, I mean, I know we'd probably have to pay for them, but adopt and put it on Iowa land records instead of having to start from scratch? I don't know if that's even possible. I just
Yeah.
don't know.
There are third parties that we could contract with, and we could say, we want you to do this. I would not support or recommend that we use any third party system where we have to transfer the data to them. That's just something that I just could not recommend. Is there software that maybe we could have a third party licensed to us. Yes, that probably exists out there. But in talking to our development team about this several times, this is a doable thing. Um, and again, I don't want people to you know quote me as saying, "Hey, this is easy. I followed off a log or anything." It will require some work, but we have the infrastructure in place to build it. We already have a central authentication system. We have a website. We have a search engine. There is no reason why we would suggest that it would be better to use an outside party. And the other factor that goes into it is that, you know, I've always been reluctant to go to Tyler or Solutions or COT and have them be an integral part of our process because, it gives the appearance that we're playing favorites or that we're, preferring one provider over another. And, we have always taken a neutral position with who counties choose as their service provider. So we've been very cautious about that. And I will just share to you that with recent changes, I think we are uh, going to be evaluating alternatives to our existing service provider because CSI, who has provided redaction services to us for many years, has been bought by Tyler. And so our business arrangement is with Tyler. And while many things are the same, um, I'm not sure we should be dependent upon just Tyler for a key part of our infrastructure. So it's a judgment call. My judgment would be you all are better off having the ILR team, especially if we can expand our developers. I think you're better off if we do it. And I think your customers will be better off because the vision that we've described here is not just a fraud notification system. It's actually something that would benefit people in the real estate industry, like your banks and your mortgage companies. It provides a service that does not exist in the marketplace today. So I think this would be a better approach in my opinion. Okay, we have to move on because we're down to our last half hour, but I just want you to, just to be aware of this discussion. The next item on the list that I need to update you on is back to blue. The legislation that has been advanced to the legislature and the Service Bureau does not include any changes to the Back to Blue program. We talked about it, and what I'm presenting to you today is an updated draft of what that might look like. And one of the main elements that we received some pushback on back in November was this idea of being clear about how information was to be treated confidentially. And not to name names or give attribution to it, but we did have outside conversations about this with some of our stakeholder groups. And we don't have sign off. I'm not representing that this is a deal. It's just a draft. Okay. But I want to show you what the current version of the draft is. And that would be that a statement would be added that would say eligible professionals shall be authorized to disclose any shielded information when such disclosure is done for a legitimate business purpose, including but not limited to the provisions of services related to a real estate transaction. The addition of that language, based on discussions that we've had, pardon me, homes some of those concerns. And so this is out in the ether. The advocates for Back to Blue know about it, but so do the other stakeholder groups as well. Not every stakeholder group is enthusiastic about updating the law. So, pardon me, while we have developed this alternative, and we believe it would be workable, it doesn't mean that there's a deal. So I would just, my update to you is that um, I do believe this is an our ESS issue because it's in our section of the code. We can't escape that. Um, and I think we generally agree that the current policy really doesn't work that well or provide much benefit to a law enforcement officer or another court officer just because of the way the legislature structured it. I think they should do better, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to agree on it. And so I think this is just going to be sort of in the background as a part of the process. And we don't know if anybody will support this change or not. And I guess we have to be okay with that. Um, we as a technical provider can offer a solution. If nobody wants the solution, then we don't do it. And I think the position that we're in right now, where all we're doing in our bill is putting the current code in a different place, that's a good place to be. And then we'll just see how this discussion shakes out with the other stakeholder groups. So I don't know what's going to happen to it yet. This is out there, but currently not in our bill. And then the last thing in terms of the update is kind of getting back to the historic unrecorded surveys. I think I said everything before, but this is a description of the tasks that would need to be done to make historic unrecorded surveys accessible online through our land records. It would require a lot of elbow grease on the part of surveyors to pull the images and the index information together. But we have created a mechanism for them to provide that information to us using Dropbox specifically. And I believe our development team, especially if we gain some enhancements to it, would be able to create um, a search function for non-recorded historic surveys and railroad maps that would be useful. Um, it's not something that is going to consume a lot of upfront investment because based on the last meeting that I had with the surveyors, I think they all agreed that in order to implement it, it will take a period of time because surveyors have ebbs and flows in their work schedule, and there are going to be times when they have time to digitize images and to maybe detail the index information that's needed. Other times they're going to be too busy. So I think if we can build the infrastructure to start it, it's something that can be incrementally grown without a huge investment on our part or on the part of any individual county. And that's where it stands. And I think the way I would just generally describe the situation is that SLSI had been a great teammate. The legislation relating to indexing surveys and plats is a cooperative effort that we've done with them, with our working group. And if we can do something, and if they're going to support your bill, then I think it is worth figuring out how to make it happen. Questions about that? That is the update as it stands right now. I need to go back. I skipped over the Beacon integration. We have had numerous conversations with Beacon about how we could do an integration. It's been fairly technical, and we have not reached an agreement yet on how to do it. And I communicated with the chief administrator who would be handling this at Beacon in November and December. And I just initiated a new communication with them this morning, to just say, hey, where are we at in this? And I don't know. So it's unknown. It's something that the way the bill is written authorizes us to do. but it gives us latitude to figure out what to do. And we would like to do something, but we need a dance partner. And so we're kind of waiting to hear back from them about what they're willing to do. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, then just one quick update from a policy perspective. In your agenda, we have a discussion on policies and procedures. And one of the things that Lisa and Corey and I have been talking about lately is what do we do with users who whose registration expires, and the way the system is set up, it makes them inactive automatically if they don't log in within 120 days. What happens? And that one of the questions that that we have is what authority
Can you set up that
do we have?
Stall's Edge?
I'm gonna,
Did you
sorry,
set
I'm
it up
gonna,
under your name? I mean, it shows my name, but did you under your name and yours?
sorry, I just muted somebody. So the question really is, what do we do in that situation? Because it's not uncommon for a user to say, hey, I can't get in. And then we can reinstate them. But the way our system is set up right now, a user doesn't own their username. It's something that we can provide to them. And I'm going to go back to sharing here. So what you see on the screen is a potential, in your packet, I provided the entire chapter 7, our terms of service, but the root of the issue is what do we do when a user wants to come back in and somebody has already taken the username that they were using. And unfortunately for them, we do not, once a user becomes inactive, then the username goes back into the pool. So our position has to be, until we change something, that they'll have to choose a different username. So this is a description of a draft policy that we might bring back to you at a future meeting. We are not done with our internal review yet, but I did want to give you a preview that we're kind of reviewing all of the use cases where somebody is kicked out of our land records or our central authentication system for various reasons. And we're just having to think through the workflow to make sure that everything makes sense. So no action requested here. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And the other two updates I would give you at the end of the agenda, and then we'll go back to the meeting summary, is we are making progress on the implementation of the new e-submission API. Service providers are working on it. There are some we are done with. So Solutions and Chat, for example, are fully integrated with us. Fiddler is in the process of rolling it out, although we are having a few technical issues doing so. I know that Avenue, which serves one county, and Zebnet, which serves another county, they're a little bit behind schedule. I'd have to say understandably, because the economics is not great for them in terms of the development work that they have to do. Probably the biggest outlier is Tyler. They are not where they need to be in terms of implementing the submission API. And as I said, I have a meeting scheduled with them next week to talk about this and other topics. And then some of you may recall that we had an issue with our operating system license last year, and their licensing structure is now untenable. And we're having to move away from them to a different Linux operating system. And that is something that is consuming a lot of Kelly's time. And so we're in the process of migrating our OS from our current service provider over to a new system that is going to be more affordable and we think actually better for us in the long term. We weren't seeking to make this change at the present time. We sort of were forced into it. And I just want the members of the standards committee, along with our leadership, to know that change is underway. We probably will not be fully done with that until the end of May. That's my update. So, can we go back up and can I ask the members of the committee to consider the meeting summary from October? And I think we have more people here. So, Kathy, Naomi, Carolyn, Jen, would one of you be willing to make a motion to approve the meeting summary?
I'll make a motion to approve the October meeting minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second? Naomi?
Carolyn lit up, but she's not, she's muted.
I can second that.
Naomi provided a second in the chat pod, and that's official. So we'll say that Kathy made the motion, Naomi seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye, or in the chat pod.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any opposed? Same sign. All right, we will declare the meeting summary to be approved. We have, well, amazingly, 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any other questions or topics that you would like to discuss? I hope we achieved the goal of giving you an update on all things relating to fee policy and modernization. Okay. If you have any questions afterwards, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email. Otherwise, thank you very much for your participation and attention today. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Wish us luck in the legislature.